What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. Okay, welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. It's where you come to hear what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? I've got a really interesting story here today with my guest, Lark Hodge. And she sent me something, and it was her attorney talking about her case. And I think all I could think when I was watching this was, oh my God, wow, I can't believe this. And, you know, it's also an interesting story about, you know, when you go to trial, what's admissible, what's not admissible, and how that can actually change what the jury would have done. And there were, when I listened to this, there were jury members that said, oh my God, if we would have known that, there's no way that this would have come the way it was. And and you really don't know that until you actually hear stories like this. But Lark has an incredible story. It's a painful story, but she survived, and her family survived, and her kids survived. And so from that standpoint, I'm really excited to tell the story, because how do you handle your worst nightmare, and then how do you survive it? That's this story. I can't wait to unpack all this. Before we do that, I want to recognize our sponsor of the show, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple of weekends walking the car lot looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a trip to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take away all the pain and hassle of getting a car. It's called Auto Plaza Direct. They are your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. And they also have warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge, the new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them that Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Welcome in, Lark. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Well, I am very honored to have you on the show. I've really been looking forward to this, because there's a couple of things that, you know, about your story that just grip you. But the fact that you got the outcome that you had, you still went in and you fought through, and your family made it through. And now you're out, and you haven't been out very long. You were just talking, it's August 20th. What's that been like for you to be out August 20th?
It's been a whirlwind, definitely. I think since stepping out of prison, I've been on go. I have 2 small kids, so I stepped right into motherhood and right into being a wife and right into being a business owner, and it's just been crazy.
That's what it sounded like, what you told me. I mean, you're on a farm, you've got all this stuff going on, you got a 9 and 8-year-old, your husband, everything, and you actually have only been out a little over a month. And like I said, it feels like you're jumping in a moving car when you get out, and that feeling lasts for a while. You just you take it all in, but it feels like it's moving really fast. So, Lark,
Definitely.
Let's go back so everybody can get to know you a little bit. What about Lark growing up? Did you, with parents, siblings, what was life like for you as a kid being Lark Hodge?
Okay. So I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana, and my mom and my dad were together until I was about 5, and they split up. My mom got remarried to my stepdad, and we lived in New Orleans until Hurricane Katrina. we actually stayed during the storm in Memorial Hospital and then was evacuated to the convention center and then evacuated out of there. And
that had to be scary, right? As a kid? How old would you have been?
Absolutely. I was 10.
Oh, gosh. I mean, I remember that so well because it was just, national news night after night after night. And the destruction and despair and people, scattered, from Texas to wherever. I can't imagine as a kid, what you would have been thinking.
Yeah, it was definitely terrible. The storm itself wasn't bad, and we were in a hospital. My mom was a nurse there, so we stayed there and we watched the storm come in, and it busted a couple of windows, and then it kind of went away. And it was cool. I have like one really vivid memory of my dad taking me out onto the top floor, and we looked out and all the power in New Orleans was out, so you could see the Milky Way.
Wow.
Well, then the next morning when we're thinking, okay, it's time to, get out of here, that's when the levees broke. But we didn't know what was happening because we don't have cell phones. There's no TV. Everybody's radio is dead at this point, and all we can see is the water rising rapidly. And we have no idea what's going on. Well, eventually someone found out that the levees had been broken, and they were going to start doing emergency evacuations of the patients. So my dad was helping getting patients life-flighted out of the hospital, and then we kind of just were stuck there for a while. They didn't really think about, nurses and their families or doctors and their families. And as a nurse there, you couldn't leave until all your patients were gone. So once my mom was able to get all the patients gone, we had heard a rumor that there was going to be airboats to take us out to Chapatula Street and be met by charter buses. Well, we got there and there was no charter buses. So eventually we had made our way to the convention center, and it was crazy. My mom's friend that worked at the hospital, her husband was part of a SWAT team in 2 parishes over, and she had a satellite phone and was able to get in touch with him, and he brought in 2 school buses, and it was all these nurses, and we all ran in the middle of the night to the school buses, loaded on the school buses, and hauled butt.
Sounds like a movie.
Psychiatric hospital. Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. My dad actually wrote a book about it, and it was insane. And at 10 years old, you really don't understand the volume of what's going on. But as I look back on it, I just looking back on life, period. I've gone through so much, but I think New Orleans was definitely the start of
a roller coaster.
The craziness, yeah. But we bounced around a lot after the storm, and we finally settled in Northeast Florida. And I went to high school there and started having kids. And I was going to college for radiology, but I ended up getting a job at the Omni in Amelia Island. So I stopped going to college because I was making decent money, good money. And it was in a nice part of the town. And that's kind of when, my life, I thought my life was going great, right? And God always has other
Seems like that's when it hits, right? It's it can't get any better than this. And then, boom, you get blindsided.
I'm living great. I'm 20 years old and making more than my dad's making as a professor, crazy. And so I meet the sommelier, and I'm oh, I'm really interested in this. I love the study of wine. I don't really like, I don't like the feeling of being drunk, but I enjoy the taste and knowing the varietal or where it's, all the different things that wine entails. So he offers me a job in Dallas, Texas, and to apprentice underneath him and eventually try to be a level 1 somm. And I'm great. I go to Texas. I do the formal job interview. I get the job, and I'm supposed to be moving within 11 days to Texas. And I get in a car accident. And that's where this whole thing starts.
Okay, well, let's unpack this nightmare because I've heard it, but I haven't heard it from you on how it all happened. But it sounded like it was, and I don't even know, I can't even remember where you were coming from, but it was a dark road. And can you just walk us through what happened that night?
Okay, so I was working. I probably worked like a 16-hour shift that night. I was on my way home like normal, 2 o'clock in the morning. Um, and I'm driving, and it's a super dark road down Heckscher Drive. Like, at that time, there was no lights. There was construction everywhere. You can barely pass a car. Sometimes I've gone down that road in the middle of the night and not passed one person until I get to the exit of where I was living at the time. Well, I have no recollection of the actual accident happening. All I know is when I woke up that obviously I was in a field of debris and people around
So
me.
you don't even remember the crash?
Have no recollection whatsoever. I ended up having a traumatic brain injury and a brain bleed. So even parts of that day are completely spotty.
It was a head-on collision, is that correct?
Head-on, 55 mile an hour.
Oh man, I'm surprised. I'm shocked that you survived. I mean, most people don't survive head-on collisions. That's amazing that you survived. How long were you? So when you woke up, was there a day that went by? How long of a period of time is that from you waking into this daze of a wreck?
So as far as the police report goes, the accident happened around like 3:25 a.m., but there's phone calls that happened before that we ended up finding out about later on down the line. Mm-hmm. But I had clocked out of work around 1 o'clock. So anywhere between 1 and 3:25 when it was actually reported is when this car accident happened. And like I said, you can drive down that road and sometimes never pass a car. So there's really no telling when the actual accident happened. I could have been sitting there for a while. My husband was a first responder. He was a fire captain with JFRD. And when he arrived on scene, he thought that I was ejected from the vehicle, but they had to use the jaws of life to get me out of the car.
And by the way, this wasn't your husband at the time.
No, it was not my husband at the
time. This is the crazy thing about this story is that the person who saved you out of this car was a fireman, and this becomes a romance love story after the fact, which I don't want to jump ahead, but I find that just fascinating that he was at the scene of your accident and saving you from your car.
Yes, definitely. But so he thinks that I was thrown from the vehicle. Obviously, I have no recollection of that whatsoever, but I was covered in marsh mud. I had twigs and branches in my hair, but my vehicle was literally in the middle of the road. So there's no way that there would have been any dirt or whatever flung into the vehicle. Like, there's no dirt on the tires, on the car, or anything. And what we ended up finding out years later through a 911 call that had been buried in the mess, was that the first person who called 911 actually witnessed my vehicle being hit by another car. Mm. So what my attorney and what everyone kind of like compiled is that I probably was ejected from the vehicle, climbed my way back to the car, and then when I was hit by that second vehicle, they probably clipped the door in so that way I couldn't get out. It's just crazy. Like, I start having more of a recollection once I'm in the hospital. It's like spotty the whole time. Like, I know that there was witness statements that like I didn't even know whose car I was in. My kids' car seats were in the back seat, and they're like, "Are your kids here?" And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about." Like, it's just completely. I'm obviously out of my head because I've hit my head so hard in this car accident. My body's in shock because I've gotten all these injuries. I broke my back. My left
So, Lark,
arm
were
was
you
complete.
unconscious or not unconscious when they came to you in your car? Were you out or were you
They had
still
to wake me up out of consciousness.
okay?
Yeah, I wasn't conscious when the first witnesses came
Okay.
to the scene.
Okay.
Um, so, and I woke up and I'm like, who are you? There was people like
Yeah.
two or
I'm sure
three
you were
people
completely
outside the
shocked.
car.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Adrenaline shock.
completely.
Mm-hmm.
And especially like, I didn't even think I needed to go to the hospital. When my husband came to the scene and he was like, okay, we're going to put you on this backboard. I'm like, no, I'm calling my mom and she's going to come get me. I'm terrified of hospitals. I'm not going.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, ma'am, look down at your arm. Please look down at your arm. And it's hanging off of my body.
Mm.
So that's just kind of like where it all started. I remember kind of the hospital ride, like the ambulance ride to the hospital. It's real in and out. I keep going back to sleep, waking back up, going back to sleep, waking back up. Same thing going into the hospital, not really understanding what's going on. They're hitting me with all kinds of different drugs and whatnot. So that's on top of me having a brain injury. I'm getting hit with all these different narcotics as soon as I walk in. I've lost so much blood that they're ordering blood transfusions, and it was just craziness. But my full memory doesn't come until later on that morning when my mom comes into the hospital room. And by that point, SHP's already been in there, JSO's already been in there. And I had no idea that someone else had passed away in this car accident until my mom came into the hospital room around like 9 a.m. in the morning. And mind you, everything's happening at like 3:30 in the morning is when the car accident, all the craziness of that is happening.
So your mom tells you that somebody died in the other car. How do you even register that into your mind? What was your reaction, and how do you compute all that with all the other things that have happened in the last 6 hours?
I think I just remember just instantly, like, my whole body was just convulsing. Like, I couldn't believe that someone had passed away. I didn't even know that another vehicle was involved, because when I had asked on the scene, hey, is everybody okay? Is everybody okay? They were like, we don't even know where the other car is. There's like, we don't see another vehicle. So my whole time until my mom comes, I'm thinking that I'm the only person in this car accident. Like, I must have hit a tree or something. Mm-hmm. When I've asked my husband, he was like, all we're doing is we're worrying about you. When I'm being questioned by police, they're not really elaborating on what's happening. They're just kind of asking me where I came from, what I was doing. Was there anything wrong with my vehicle? So I had no idea. And then once my mom told me, it was like my whole world was just done. I couldn't believe it. Like, how do you compute a loss of life and then you don't even remember anything? Mm-hmm. Like, so you're in this twilight zone where you like wake up and you're like, oh my God, someone else died in this car accident. That's crazy. And then you have all those other thoughts of, well, why am I still here? Mm-hmm. And it was just, it was insane. And the hospital room that I was in had a TV in it. So, you know, first morning news, I made the morning news and I'm on the news and I'm like, oh my God, like this is crazy. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. I had been going in and out of surgery while I was in the hospital that day, so I didn't get to see all the news articles, which I'm grateful for now. Mm-hmm. Because the media is definitely,
well, they create a narrative and they go with it, and that's one thing about news is they go down a lane, and that's their lane, and even if they get more information, they decide if they're going to use that information or not. When does it turn for you, Lark, that this is like coming at you in a different way than just having a car accident?
About 3 days later, I'm still in the hospital. Another FHP police officer comes in.
Okay.
And they're telling me that my vehicle is going to be impounded and I'll never be able to get it back because it's in like heavy forensics for DUI manslaughter. And I'm like, DUI manslaughter? What are you talking about? That's crazy. And they're like, well, we suspect that you were underneath the influence. You were on your way home from work and you had a wine bottle in your car, and we think that you were under the influence. We have an officer that said that you had bloodshot, watery eyes in the hospital, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm like, that's crazy. And at this point, I don't know my rights. I've never been in trouble. I've never been pulled over by the police. Nothing.
Bloodshot, watery eyes could also mean that you were in a head-on collision and you just survived.
Right. And I've been hit with so many narcotics in the hospital that they hit me with Narcan twice because they overdosed me. Wow. So, I'm like, this is crazy. Well, I then at that moment kind of shut down, deleted social media. My mom's father is an attorney in Birmingham, Alabama. So he was telling my mom like all the things to do, like make sure she's not on social media, make sure she like doesn't talk to anybody. So it's too late now because I've already given my blood for one in the hospital. Mm-hmm. I've made a statement that, you know, all about me being whatever. I didn't know my Miranda rights at this point, and you're asking me all these questions while I'm completely out of my mind. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, I'm like, oh, I'm going to prison. I have these two small kids. My son's 8 months old at the time. My daughter's 2. What is going on? I'm completely injured. I can't go to jail like this.
But Lark, I remember from what was told and your attorney talked about is that there were 2 different blood alcohol content things that happened, and one was different than the other. Did you? I mean, before you left work, do you even remember? Did you have a drink, or what was going on before you got to where you were going? Because your blood alcohol content was actually below the level of the legal limit in Florida. Mm-hmm. When they tested it in the hospital, it was different. But then I find out from the attorney that those hospital tests, as opposed to the other tests, those don't match most times, and I don't even understand how that all works. But you had 2 different blood alcohol content takes, on one under, and I think one right at it. So at that point, did you have had you brought an attorney into the situation? And I guess it was the attorney that I saw that was talking about this case, because he said it's the case that stayed with him forever. How did you get to him?
Okay, so my attorney, Louis Fusco, I've known him for a long time. I had a high school boyfriend who went to school with him and actually helped with one of his cases that he was going through. And Louis was actually not my first pick for an attorney. I went with another attorney first, and his name is Lee Hutton. And there's a backstory with that too. When I went to go see Lee Hutton about 3 months after the car accident, when I was finally released from the hospital and I was able to go and meet with these attorneys, when I was telling him the whole thing, he told me, hey, your toxicology isn't back yet, but if your toxicology is below the legal limit, like you're telling me that it's going to be, then they're not going to file charges. You're going to be okay.
Okay.
Because at this point, I think, no, Derek's toxicology was not back at that point. So I'm like, okay. So my toxicology comes out the next week, and it's the legal blood, which was below the legal limit.
Yeah.
It was a .06 and a .058. So I take it back to Lee Hutton, and I'm like, hey, my blood alcohol is below the legal limit. What's going on? There's no other drugs in my system. And he's like, they're never going to charge you with this. You're going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, cool. We're good. Well, I think like November or December, Derek's blood alcohol comes back. And it's a .15, and it has narcotics in his system. So I call Lee Hutton back, and I'm like, hey, update. Derek's toxicology was just uploaded to the FHP report, and it says this. And he's like, hey, I just want you to know that I can't represent you anymore because now I'm going to be basically second in command with the state attorney's office.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, oh, great. Well, that would have been, nice to know whenever that decision happened or whatever. Thank you, because I've sat here and told you my entire case, and now you're going to be sitting with the state attorney's office. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Lark, when you're saying, I think you're saying Derek, what are you referring to?
That's the other driver.
That's the other driver. Okay, wait a minute. Okay, I want to make sure, because that's why I'm stopping you there. That guy who was driving the other car, I just want to make sure everybody understands this. That guy had a blood alcohol content of 0.15, and he had narcotics in his system. Okay. Yes. I just want everybody who's listening to understand that had nothing to do with your blood alcohol content. Yours is 0.06 or 0.58, but his comes back at 0.15 and has narcotics in his system. This is the guy that died. Okay. Yeah. Just want to clear that up.
Yeah. So when Mr. Hutton tells me that he can no longer be my attorney, I'm like, well, I need to go find someone else. So that's when Lewis popped up. Lewis is a DUI attorney here in Jacksonville, and because I've had prior engagements with him, I was like, perfect, we're going to go with him. And so I call Lewis and give him the down low on everything, and I still haven't been arrested for this. I still haven't heard anything back from FHP. I'm finding out these FHP reports on my own by like hounding them every day, calling up at the office. And Lewis has never had a DUI manslaughter case. So he's very this is new to him. He's DUI.
Yeah.
Not DUI.
Helping people get out of their DUIs, right?
Right. And well, at almost the year mark, I get a phone call from the corporal Everett while I'm at work, and he's like, hey, you knew this day was coming. I need you to come in for questioning. I'm like, okay, well, let me have my attorney call you. Let me get your phone number, whatever. And he gives me a wrong phone number with a wrong extension.
This is a year after the accident.
This is a year after the accident.
Okay.
So keep in mind, for a whole year, we haven't heard anything since day 3 of me being in the hospital. Nothing at all. So I'm in a panic. I leave work. I come straight home. I'm trying to get my life together, like calling a bondsman, making sure my attorney knows what's going on. So Lewis is on it. And we don't really hear anything for like 2 or 3 days because Lewis can't get in touch with FHP. Like, no one knows where this Corporal Everett is at. No one knows this extension that he gave me. So I'm calling, Lewis is calling, Lewis's whole office is calling, the bondsman's calling. There is no warrant issued for me yet.
Okay.
And
what does the attorney find out? Does he find out any information?
He's like, there's no warrant, nothing's been put to the state attorney's office.
All you have is this phone call. Okay.
There's just this mystery phone call.
Okay.
And so Lewis is like, just calm down. You're going to be okay. If something happens, I've got you. We're going to get you out. You'll be fine.
Okay.
Well, I'm sitting in my kitchen 4 days later after the mysterious phone call, and lo and behold, FHP cruisers are coming down my driveway. And they still don't have a warrant, but they take me anyway. So it's the whole thing's just crazy. It's insane. It's ridiculous. But I get down to the state attorney's office. I sit in the patrol car for like an hour with no police officer in it because he's in the state attorney's office. I'm guessing going and getting the warrant at this point. He comes back in and takes me to booking, and
seems really odd they didn't have a warrant before they came down your place and to take you out. That's kind of backwards. Yeah. Okay.
Tell me about it. And then left me in a cruiser
for about an hour.
Yeah, in the front seat, shackled in front.
Yeah.
Cruiser still running.
What's going through your mind?
I'm petrified.
Yeah.
I have never been in a position like this. I've never been in handcuffs. I've never been in a police cruiser other than like field trips or whatever,
right.
you know.
And you haven't been able to call anybody that you've been taken away?
No.
Okay.
Nope. So I am petrified, and I get down to booking. I get my phone call, and they're on it. I get out immediately. At this point, me and my husband still aren't married, but me and him are living together, and we're in a full-blown relationship. Well, he works for the fire department. So, you know, he's got people everywhere, friends everywhere. So I'm being looked after and very well taken care of.
And he was at the scene of your accident.
Right.
Yeah.
He's the state's like main witness.
Yeah.
So I get out, and that's when the ball starts to roll with my case, right? Because I'm petrified, and I'm an organized mess. So I want to have my hands in on everything. And knowing that Lewis hasn't had a DUI manslaughter case, I want to make sure that nothing's missed.
Right.
No detail goes awry. And we start getting discoveries, and we're diving into this, and it's crazy. We're like, how? Why is the state even pushing so hard
Why are they
right
pursuing
now?
it?
What is really going on? We find out that Derek had a lifetime suspension on his driver's license since 1989. That's longer than I've been alive. He had been pulled over for 75 driving infractions after that suspension of his driver's license. There's anywhere between 5 to 15 DUIs. We had to get a private investigator to bury out these arrest and booking reports because when we were going on to our clerk of courts thing, everything was redacted. Like, everything was redacted. It was ridiculous.
That when I was listening to your attorney talk about this case, was he going and asking the other side, like, why, knowing the past history of this person that died, why are you going after this girl, knowing what you know? I mean, was there any conversations that were going back and forth that were making any sense?
I'm sure. I didn't really dive into like the discussions between Lewis and the state. I kind of stayed out of that. But I know the family was pushing really hard for it, and I understand. I can understand to an extent.
Sure.
Like, I don't know what it's like to have my dad or my brother or whatever ripped and torn away from me in a car accident, like
Right.
leaving the house one day and then all of a sudden not being able to see that person ever again. So I can understand like the hurt and the devastation behind it. The family was pushing for it very hard. But they were also pushing for a civil suit against the hotel that I was working for.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I believe that this was more of a political pull than anything.
Well, let's fast forward a little bit because you get into this mess. Your attorney's dealing with this as a first time deal with a manslaughter. How long does this process take for you? Because I feel like when I've talked to you, it was a long process.
Yeah. So the car accident happened May 29th of 2016. I get arrested May of 2017, and I go for pretrial hearings for 2 years after that. And then I'm found guilty in May of 2019 and remanded into custody then.
So we're talking about 4 years? Is that
3?
3 years. So 3 years of this, as you continue to gather all this discovery and all these different things that go on, there is another thing that comes in that they took the blood from the hospital. And so that's what they're running with, even though that they've got the true test, the legal test. The legal test was the 0.06 or the 0.58. When you get to trial, first of all, how long does this trial last?
It was a 4-day trial.
4-day trial. Did you feel like, because I don't get to talk to too many people that go to trial, because it seems like everybody that I talk to ends up they're pleading out their situation. You went to trial. Did you feel like in that trial that things were going your way, or did you feel like, oh my God, this is going to be a disaster, and I've got this horrific thing to look forward to? What was the trial like?
So for the first 2 days of trial, we felt good. We didn't feel great, but we felt good about the situation. Now, mind you, a lot of my evidence was not admissible. So I'm going in a trial kind of like with my hands tied behind my back.
Oh, I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that, Lark, because that's the biggest part of this whole thing with it comes out that the judge rules that his blood alcohol content and his history of what he had was not admissible in this case, which I find absolutely just jaw-dropping, because how that affects what happened that night is all the difference in the world. I don't know how in the world it wasn't admissible. I don't know how all these legal things happen, but that not being the situation and them running with two different blood alcohol content, the jury not knowing the other side at all, I can't imagine what you were thinking walking into this thing with the biggest part of the defense for you not to be able to be even discussed.
Yeah, so pre-trial hearings, I have Judge Healy as my judge, and they call him Hang Them High Healy. He is like hardcore. He was also the judge that did the Michael Brown trial here in Florida.
Yeah.
Maybe that's his name. I
remember you
that.
talking about it. It was the national story, because there was a Michael Brown in St. Louis too that went through.
Oh yeah. So my first day walking in the court and I see him, I'm like, oh my gosh, and everyone's talking about how terrible it is, whatever. So we file these motions to try to get some of this stuff in, because when you're going to trial, that's what pretrial is all about, is getting everything into the trial. Mm-hmm. So first was the medical records. So there's two different kinds of blood tests. Your legal blood test is done by whole blood, which means they take into account all of your blood cells that get pulled. And it's done specifically. There's specific wipes that they use. There's a specific needle that they use. Everything is completely controlled. Your medical blood is not. Your medical blood is done by blood plasma, which is a higher concentration of your blood cells. And they wipe you down with alcohol wipes. They use a different size needles. There's no chain of custody.
A variety of differences.
And variety. So my medical blood was right at the legal limit, right? But it's blood plasma, so you actually have to like times it, divide it, add, subtract, and then you get the results of what the whole blood would be. And that's why you need a toxicologist in this whole case, because it's complete. The number that it is completely different than what the whole blood number would be. And when they did that, it ended up being just below the legal limit, even with the medical blood. I think it was like a 0.079, which is still below the legal limit.
Yeah.
So we're pushing to get this medical blood dismissed because it's prejudicial. When a jury is hearing that, they're like, oh, well, I mean, it does say that it's over the legal limit, or what, it's close, and it was an hour after the car accident, so she had to be drunk at the time. So my attorney is fighting. We are fighting. We have probably filed 8 or 9 different motions against this medical blood, because listening to a toxicologist for 4 hours in a courtroom, a jury's going to get bored listening to that, and they're going to come up with their own notion. Well, everything that we filed was denied. Well, our last one that we pushed for is for Derek's history, his blood alcohol level at the time of the accident, and the drugs that were in his system to be allowed to be told during trial. And it was
denied.
Denied.
Here's the thing that I think is so interesting about it is, let's just say that we're at the legal limit of 0.08, or maybe you were a little bit over 0.08. Let's just give that up. The fact that he was at 0.15, how can you assume who caused the accident, because no one was at the scene? I find it just absolutely fascinating that a judge could listen to this. Yes, somebody died. You could have died. But the fact that his blood alcohol content was so much more, and he had a history, papered history of this. So he denies it all. You go into the trial. The jury comes out, and you are convicted. And then you have jury members after first of all, I want to talk about what were you thinking that day when the jury came back out and they said what they said? Up until this point, you haven't even been ever involved in anything legal. You were in a bad car accident, coming home from work at 2:00 in the morning, whatever it was. Now you are standing before a jury that is going to say you're either innocent or guilty, and you're going to be looking at prison time. When they came back and they said you were guilty, how did you react to that news?
I was devastated. When we got the phone call to return back to court, I kind of already had it in my head because the verdict came back so quick. Like, my attorney was like, hey, look, if they take like an hour, 2 hours, it's probably not going to be a good thing, Lark. So when we got the phone call, it was, I think, a little bit over an hour. I was like, oh, well, my kids were at the attorney's office, so I'm telling them, I'm like, hey, look, you guys are all you have. Like, I need you guys to get along, and I need you to be strong, and I need you to know that I love you no matter what, and I need you to be strong for each other. So I leave the office, and we walk back to the courtroom, and I get in the courtroom, and the clerk that's in there, she's so sweet, phenomenal woman. And she obviously knows the entire situation because she's been typing, transcribing the whole thing from 3 years prior, right? So she knows what the jury doesn't know. Yeah. And she's looking at me, and I can just see it on her face.
You sense it.
I'm like, oh gosh. Well, the jury comes out and they find me guilty. And you can, like, the clerk was devastated. And she's kept up with me the entire time that I've been incarcerated, and actually was like texting my attorney before I was coming home, like, Lark's about to be home, like, and you could just like feel it in the courtroom, because I had so many people with me, like, everyone's just disappointed, but we kind of knew it was going to happen because of the way the evidence was set up.
Sure.
And I can't.
You'd had a lot of
blame the
defeats
jury.
before you ever got into that courtroom.
Right.
Yep.
And I really can't blame the jury for coming up with the verdict that they did with what was presented to them.
Yep.
And I lost it in the courtroom. This is like, so the entire time that I'm being the good person, right? I go to court every time that I'm supposed to. My attorney has signed a waiver that I don't even have to appear in court, but I'm going. I'm going once a week. I'm going in the courtroom. I'm making sure I'm there. I'm being,
right.
I'm trying to be
everything
as perfect as I can be, right? And I lost it when the judge left, the jury left. I looked at the state attorneys and I gave him a piece of my mind, because at this point I haven't talked to you at all. I have been respectful, but I feel like you have just taken my whole life away from me, and you know what you did, because you're the one who obviously is on the other side of this chair. You know all the evidence in front of you, and you still came at me the way you did. And I lost it.
Understandably.
Yeah, definitely. But it bit me in the butt later on.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
They take me, I'm remanded into custody immediately, and I'm freaking out, right? The little bit of time that I spent in booking was nothing compared to me walking in here and thinking that I'm going to be in here for at least 10 years, because that's what the state was pushing for, and I'm not going to walk back out. What? That's crazy. I was freaking out.
Yeah. I can't imagine. I know it had to be, I know what it feels like to walk into the unknown, and you were walking into the worst unknown because you never planned on this, and now you're dealing with, and you haven't been sentenced yet. So how long did you have to wait for the sentencing?
It was about 3 weeks until sentencing, and during that time, there was just like a lot of soul searching, when people go to prison, you find God or whatever. I knew God before I went in there, and I was angry with God when I got to prison. Like, this is crazy. I go to church every Sunday. I go to Bible study every Wednesday. I'm in my women's group. I go to Panera Bread with all my girls every week. I am a devout Christian. Yeah. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing.
Why this happened to me?
Why am I going through this right now? I don't understand what's happening. I'm angry. I'm very angry with God at this point. And, but he was definitely showing me a lot of grace while I was in that 3-week stretch. Me and the children of my fathers of my children were going through it just horribly. He was sitting with the victim's family, like, it was really bad. Feeding the state attorney, it was so bad. But he was trying to get custody of my kids, and we had been going through custody battles since before I had.
So you had all that going on also.
Right. Well, during that 3 weeks of me getting sentenced, my judge ended up ex-naying his custody, and all he got was weekend visitations, and my mom was granted guardian ad litem. So I still had primary custody, but my mom was able to make like medical decisions. So definitely God was still working, and I wasn't seeing it at the time, but now I do looking back. Well, when I go in for sentencing, my husband is my rock, right? He has gotten all of these letters from all of my friends, family, community members, the fire department, the police department, and and has all my family fly in because, mind you, I'm from New Orleans, so not a lot of my family lives here in Florida. So we've got my aunt from Texas is flying in. Everyone's there.
Everybody's
so
showing
when I
support.
walked into the room and I see this group of people that haven't been in the same room since I was little, was amazing. And I have all these letters of recommendation. All these people are getting up and saying wonderful things. And I had won my downward departure. So I knew walking in that I was probably not going to look at the whole time. But the state was still pushing for maximum, even after hearing all of that. And I got up and, I don't want to say this and make it seem like I'm an evil person, because I'm not. And I've met some wonderful ladies in prison that are DUI manslaughter as well, who have the exact same feelings as I do. I do not feel responsible for my car accident. There is a level of remorse that I have for Derek, right? Because it's a loss of life. And I am devastated that someone lost their life in this car accident. But I can't say that I'm the one who caused it. So getting up and speaking to the family and letting them know, like, God, I'm devastated that Derek's no longer here. And I don't know how that feels to have somebody like that taken away from me. And I'm expressing this to the family and crying, and it was bad.
Yeah.
Well, I got sentenced and I was graced. 5 years in, 6 years out. 2 of those 6 years I'm on house arrest. And I'm almost at the end. I mean, I'm done with my 5-year bid.
So let's talk about this, because 5 years is 5 year sentence is you going into prison, because that is, you were entering that world that you knew you were going to have to live in for a while. How did you handle it?
So in the beginning, it's rough, I think. I mean, anytime that you go into a situation like that, especially not being, I've never went to juvenile or dealt with anything like that. So it's a different world behind those gates. You have hierarchy, you have
primitive
you're
society.
Uncomfortable because you're uncomfortable. You are surrounded by all kinds of different walks of life. You are having to do things that you've never done before, like taking showers with groups of people or using the bathroom in front of other people.
Yeah.
Like, that's terrifying when you first walk in. And I was young. So I'm growing up in the system at this point. And at first, when you're in your RNO camp, which is like your orientation camp, you're there for 3 months, and it's terrible because you're there with people who have short sentences or people who are going in for life, but it's all brand new to prison people. So it's gross. It's disgusting. People are in high emotions there, and we're all women.
Yeah.
So at
easily
the end of the
triggered
day, like,
environment.
Right. It's terrible. Like, my second night there, I saw some stuff that no one should ever see. But once I got to the camp that I was permanently placed at, I flourished. And I know that God had me there at that time, at that season, for a reason. I was in a vocation, so I did horticulture, and I graduated with a nursery management degree, and I worked in the greenhouse. And then being in the greenhouse, our warden was outside all the time, and he saw me, and we were able to, like, small chat or whatever, and one of his cooks was ending her sentence. So he was like, "Hey, have you ever cooked or, done anything culinary wise?" And I was like, "Yeah, I cook at home all the time." So I started cooking in the cafe. And that's like the top of the food chain in prison, when you're able to eat what you want.
Yeah.
And political wise, like, I'm in there with the warden. I'm in there with, I know the right people in order to make my time go easily.
Yeah. And it helps to eat up your time too, when you have something that you're focused on, like a job, a prison job that you feel like you're getting, like you're working in the garden, you're cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Lark, how did you handle hard days in prison? What was your escape?
We have tablets here in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So like getting underneath the blanket and kind of like plugging into a podcast or a movie.
And by the way, you'll probably like that you will be plugged into that tablet, because it's on the Adovo platform that goes into 275 prisons. So we get thousands of listens a month on stories just like yours.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, I love it because it's it's full circle for me. I was always, looking at, what could I listen to? I was in a federal prison, so they didn't have tablets, but, it was like, what can I listen to? What can I read, whatever. But what I like about this is that these people who are listening to this that are in prison, they're seeing that people survive and that they're making it, they're breaking the narrative. And so anyway, I didn't mean to throw you off track there, but when you said that about the tablets, that's one of the things that I really enjoy about doing the podcast, because your story is going to be in there.
Yeah, that's amazing, because when we got to listen to some podcasts while we were in there that, the Real Vita podcast and all those other ones, that was like, our Florida is just now starting to get into podcasts. So every month we get like a new little one on there. Yeah. So that was definitely.
So that was an escape for you to kind of get away. Yeah.
Definitely. Or being in the garden.
Yeah.
Being a garden girl at Gadsden, you were able to get out of the dorm anytime that you wanted. All you had to do was say, "Hey, I'm about to go back to the garden." So
Lark,
the dorm was unruly, you were able to get out.
You're able to get out, and that's a big deal, because it's hard to feel like you have your own personal time in prison, because I've had many people tell me like it's the loneliest crowded place I've ever been, because you do make connections, but you don't, for the most part, you're with those people all the time. And if you have a way to get away, that does kind of give you a chance. I used to walk a lot, and that was just kind of a way to just kind of feel like me. But your kids and your husband, your mom, whatever the case was, I know you had support in that. How did your kids, or what did your kids know, and how did you guys work through that? Because they were young.
Definitely. They were young when the car accident happened. Again, Isaiah was 8 months and Sky was about 2 years old. So I have always been completely open and honest with my kids. Mm-hmm. In this day and age, social media, the internet, like, I come home and my kids have laptops for school.
Yeah.
So I always knew that I didn't want to lie to them and say, "Oh, mommy's going to go to work for a while," because at the end of the day, they're going to get on this internet and they're going to look it up. All you have to do is type in Lark Hodge and my mugshot comes up.
Right.
So they've always known mommy was in a car accident. It was an accident at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And mommy has to go away for a little bit. But I'm here. I'm still your mom. I'm still dealing with schoolwork or dealing with behavior problems that we're having, doctor's visits and whatnot, just through the phone.
Stay plugged in. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, in the beginning of my prison sentence, I called home all day, every day, right? I feel like I want to be home all day, but it was really debilitating to my mental health and to theirs.
Sure.
once I started realizing like they would get on the phone but they wouldn't say anything, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna call like once a week so that they're able to like be able to tell me all the fun things that they've done this week. Because when I call them, I'm interrupting their playtime. They don't want anything to do with mom on that note.
Yeah.
But I was in prison during COVID, so our visits were
Limited.
null and void for like a year and a half. And when we finally started getting visits back, they were behind a plastic screen, and it was terrible. So I went a while without my kids coming. But there at the end, they were coming like 2 times a month. And Gadsden's pretty good about their like mother-child bonding. They have a playroom. They have a playground outside. They have board games in there. The officers are a different demeanor than they are behind the gate as they are in VP. And we had a Sesame Street event right before I left, and my kids were able to like interact with the girls that I'm in prison with face paintings, and they got their nails done and Play-Doh, and it was a really wonderful experience. And I think it was a good thing for my kids to see that at the end of my
you were there
journey.
4.5 years, and
yeah,
I really proud of you, Lark, on how you handled it, because you could have, I talk about this a lot, you could have become the victim mentality that this shouldn't have happened to me. And I think when you take that mentality, it takes away all your strength, and you crawl up in a fetal position and kind of give up. You didn't do that at all. You went the other way. You said, I'm going to survive this. Your family stayed together. You found yourself a way in prison with people and jobs and keeping yourself focused. And I think that helps so much for your mental capacity, but I also think it helps when you get out, because you haven't wasted time. You've used time to get through your time, and it gives you, I think, a sense of confidence that if I can survive this, I can survive anything. And, there's only 2 people, and, the greatest, line in Shawshank Redemption, you get busy living or get busy dying. That's kind of prison. You have 2 types of people in prison, the ones that have given up, and you see them. They've given up, and you see the other ones trying to make whatever work and adapt to it. And I think that's what you did. And I think it's so interesting because your story is totally unplanned. I mean, who knows what's going to happen in the middle of the night? You get hit by a car, and all of a sudden your world spirals into a world you never thought, and then you're in prison for 4.5 years. But your attitude of that, and I think your kids will see that, hey, mom, she stood strong.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not saying that there wasn't like times that I was ready to jump the cliff.
Everybody has that. Everybody has it.
There were definitely those times, but I tried to maintain positive attitude, because at the end of the day, if you have an EOS date, you're getting out and you're going home.
You're going to go home.
And the world is crazy and it's chaotic, but you have to make the best out of it.
And I think you almost have to do mind hacks to keep yourself out of the, when you're talking there, you're reminding me of my world when I had a calendar that my youngest daughter made every year, and I would write every night in that calendar box of that day, and I would try to find my win for the day. And people would say, Brent, how do you find a win in prison? But you can, and I might have had a good conversation with my girls. Something might have happened good. I got forklift certified or something at the food warehouse, whatever it was. But I also knew that if I had a bad day, I actually let myself go all the way down bad. Like, I'm having a no good, very bad day. But my mind hack was I wouldn't allow myself to fill in 2 boxes of bad, because I felt like if I did that, that's the slippery slope. If I can't bring myself back up that next day, I'm in an environment that I could actually slide down a path that it's a bad week, a bad month, a bad year. And then you are on the other side of not the one that's surviving and adapting and getting through. So I think that's the other part of surviving, Lark, is that you have to kind of figure it out. as you go along. And it's good, bad, ugly, but one way or the other, you figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And you made it. I
Definitely.
mean, as you were getting close to the door, what were you thinking? Because, I mean, 4.5 years is a decent amount of time. What was going through your mind? Like, I'm getting ready to get, once you see your name up there that you're going to be released, what were you thinking?
I was so ready to go. My last year was my last 9 months was terrible. I feel like I had been taken out of the garden and had been put in this drug rehab program because with DUI manslaughter, you're mandated to do that. So from going and being able to be in the kitchen and being out in the garden all day to being in this drug rehab program was terrible. But when I tell you that Gadsden is where they send most of the DUI manslaughter cases here in Florida, and I was able to form such a network of women that were going through the exact same emotions that I've been going through. And I heard one woman say, like, she was like, I have thought that I was a monster for so long until I met other women who were DUI manslaughter. And if I can't look at them like a monster, then I can't look at myself like that anymore.
That's deep.
And that resonated so deeply. And I think when you have a charge that has an accidental death involved in it, you need to have that network of people that have the same exact emotions that you have. Because at the end of the day, no one is going to know what DUI manslaughter feels like except for someone else who has been through that exact same thing. And I'm not saying all of our cases are the same.
No.
Because you have women that were like quadruple the legal limit and ran into a school bus with 6 kids in the back. And then you have people like me, where there was another woman in there that was below the legal limit, and she was in a head-on collision with a motorcycle couple, and she is so broken from it. And I pray that one day that she'll like find her purpose and be able to like live with herself on that. But it's people like that, like, I want to be able to lift her up and let her know that at the end of the road, it's going to be okay. And you're going to be able to live for your kids and your husband and everything else that is available to you out here in this real world. So even though that 9 months in that drug rehab program was like the worst thing that I've ever went through in my life, I can definitely pick pieces out of it that I
got something
know
from it.
that I was supposed to be there at that time, because I couldn't imagine going the rest of my life without knowing that there is that network of women that I can always reach back out to and be like, hey, are you feeling okay today? Like,
it's your own support network.
Definitely. And that same girl who was in that motorcycle accident, we had at Gadsden a motorcycle event, right? And they brought out big motorcycles and put them out on the yard. And when she went there, like, all of the DUI manslaughter girls surrounded her and were like, are you okay? Because look, these motorcycles, like, are you doing okay mentally? Are you able to handle this? And it was just so beautiful to be able to see people surround someone that she thinks she's a monster still. And she doesn't think that people should love her because of what she's done. And that's not it. At the end of the day, it's an accident.
Yeah, that's right. So you got out August 20th. What's life been like for you in the last month and a week or so?
Golly. So I came like head first into being a mom because I got out on Sunday. My kids were in school on Monday. So I woke up 5:30 in the morning, getting them ready for school, taking them to school. And then I had to sign in with probation and meet my probation officer, and I'm on house arrest. So I have to fill out forms every week. I have to completely let him know what I'm doing hour by hour. It has to be approved. I am trying to figure out this whole license situation because in the state of Florida, our laws are so like, the word "or" is in there so many times that statutes are so messed up because with DUI manslaughter, you can apply for your hardship if you have had your license revoked for 5 years or from your last date of incarceration. So we're trying to juggle this because my license has been revoked for 5 years now.
Yeah.
I'm ready for a hardship.
Right.
So dealing with that, and I live out in the middle of nowhere. So not having a vehicle is really just...
Yeah, you're really on house arrest.
Right. And my husband, he retired from the fire department in 2019. So after I went in, and he ended up going out and working on an oil rig as a paramedic. So
wow. He's
going to go out on his first boat trip while I've been home. And so that's going to be interesting in a couple of weeks. But I'm just trying to get this business off the ground with this farming. And it's exciting to see, like, when I went in, people weren't really all that into the whole, like, home gardening thing. And I guess since COVID and the grocery store's not really having anything, it's booming. And so we have 2 cows that are being pinned right now out of our 11 that are going to be processed soon. So we'll be able to sell that. And then when the fall garden starts, I'll start selling the vegetables and canning and everything. And we're really interested in getting into this microgreens thing because it's like, that's a booming industry.
Yeah.
So, and it's something that I love, and it's something that I was able to accomplish while I was in prison.
Exactly.
Like,
you got to practice up in there on that. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think, Lark, after you've gone through all this and survived? What do you think is your biggest takeaway through all of it?
I just think that we all have a purpose. And even when we go through the worst and you think that there's nothing that can happen out of what you're going through, I promise you that there's something good. There's something good that's going to come out of the bad. And it might take 5, 7, 10 years down the line for you to figure out what it was. But I promise you that out of that bad, there is something good.
I love that. I think that's a great way to end it because that is such a great answer because so many people are looking for that. People who are stuck thinking that they can't get to the next step, but they've dealt with this nightmare. How can I ever survive? And you're saying you can, and there's some good things that come from it, and they can blossom into other opportunities like you're doing with the farming. I love it, Lark. I love how you've handled things. I love your attitude. I hope, nothing but great things for your husband, your kids, and you. And you've earned your way through surviving this nightmare, and it's so great to see you on the other side of it. And talking about if anybody got anything out of this today, and I know you did because it's a great story of how to get through things, leave a review on Apple. That'd be great. I know it's a hassle, but it really puts the show on steroids. Follow the show. It's easy on Spotify. You hit the bell. And on Apple, you just hit the three bars up there. It drops down. Follow. If you want to know any more about what's going on with me, go to BrentCassidy.com. It's with a TY, not a DY. And as I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from prison, stay strong, and I'll do the same. Lark, thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Nightmare Success, in and out.